Hard to believe we're already 3 Thursdays into 2025, and it's time now for our third 2025 edition of Our Town, brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust. Hi, I'm Darren. I'm your host of the program, and we have three guests on the program this morning. We'll talk to Waukon City Manager Gary Boden. A lot of interesting discussion on proposed property tax reform in the state of Iowa. We'll get an update from Decorah School Superintendent Tim Cronin, but first things first, next week is Restaurant Week in the city of Decorah, and we'll hear all about it first on the program this morning with Jessica Rilling, Decorah Area Chamber of Commerce Executive Director. Jessica gets us going on Our Town, brought to you by Decorah Bank and Trust, right here on 94.9 and 99.1 The River. Our first conversation of the year with the Decorah Area Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Jessica Rilling, and coming up next week is Restaurant Week in the city of Decorah. It's the second restaurant week. The initial one was last year. And Jessica, I'm sure there's plans for bigger and better things here in 2025.
Yeah, we're really excited. The first restaurant week last year was really well received. Good participation. We had people traveling from Rochester, La Crosse, up in the Des Moines area to pick Decorah for a weekend trip, specifically because Restaurant Week was happening. And we're already seeing that take place again, people calling to make reservations, especially at the fine dining ones that are participating that have a fixed course menu, which just means for a certain price, you get, appetizer, entree, dessert. And yeah, it's January 20th through the 26th. So coming up soon. You can start getting hungry now. And breakfast, lunch, and supper options for that week. And quite a few good specials, things that are only available during Restaurant Week, which makes it fun. We can talk about some of those delicious choices if you'd like.
And we could definitely do that. But before we do, how did this idea come to be last year? And obviously, it was well received, as you mentioned, last year. So you're expanding into year number two. But how did the
Yeah.
original idea of Restaurant Week at this time of year come to be?
We talked a lot with the chamber board and staff about how we serve restaurants. The restaurants in the Decorah area have been, wonderful chamber members for a long time. And they understand that a lot of the work the chamber does benefits them, right? Business assistance, but also tourism. So we talked a lot about how we served several sectors, and restaurants was one of them. We wanted to add something. So I think there are some bigger cities that have restaurant weeks. We had some good conversations with Ramel out at Twin Springs. They were originally in Chicago, and there seemed to be interest for it. So we talked with quite a few restaurants to see, if we coordinated that and promoted it, if they would be interested in participating. And yeah, it was just big yeses all around. So that was part of how we picked when it took place also. The point of this week is very much to help restaurants. The first quarter is slow. And when we talk about these small businesses having cash flow in the winter months, this is something that can have a measurable impact. So I guess those are sort of the two biggest factors. The first was the chamber wanting to serve restaurants. And the second was choosing something very deliberately that was helpful to them. So they don't pay anything outside of their chamber membership. So nothing changed with the cost for them. This was one of our ways to serve them better. So yeah, that it's we did it for good reasons and had really great success the first year, which is why we're doing it again. I think it will be a very good tradition for January.
And we've gotten the why and the how and everything, how it came together. But let's get to the food. Let's get to the specials. What
Yeah.
type of deals, what type of specials, events, etc., will the core area restaurants be having next week?
Yeah, so this is, if folks haven't been out to restaurants here in a while, there are several new things, and this might be a week when they, make a point to go and try them. So one of the new restaurants is Lefse Lodge, They opened pretty close to the end of the year here when the holidays were starting. So a lot of people still haven't been in. It's in the location where Java John's was on the corner by the co-op. And they're doing a Norwegian meal special. We were so excited to see a lot of the stuff on their menu was Norwegian. And we get asked about that a lot at the Chamber and the Visitor Center. So they're really leaning into that for Restaurant Week. Ham balls, mashed potatoes, carrot casserole, and Rod makes luffs, of course, which you could add. And they do rumagrat. And I got to say, like, I know we can get that during Nordic Fest, but this is really the time of year when rumagrat shines. It's cold out. So if you're going to have a hot pudding with a lot of butter on it, this is your moment. And that's just a nice thing to stop in, see those new restaurants owners. Rod and Cheryl are lovely, working hard. This is their kind of retirement chapter, something fun. And they would love to host you for Restaurant Week. So Norwegian meal special, and that's a chance to try a new restaurant. Also wanted to make sure and mention that Dixie's Beer Garden has new owners and is serving food. So sometimes not everybody has heard that yet or been up there. It's incredibly delicious. And so Restaurant Week is a good chance to stop in and try that if you haven't. They're doing a wings and fries, buy a dozen wings, get a basket of fries free, and a special smash burger tacos. So I'm excited to try those. We encourage the restaurants to do something that's special just for Restaurant Week, right? To create some urgency for those visitors and the customers. Blazing Star is doing 2 noodle nights. So normally they do a lot of rice bowls, which people really enjoy. I'm really excited to try a couple of these noodle dishes. They're just doing these noodle nights on the Friday and Saturday of Restaurant Week. So if people haven't been into Blazing Star, or if they're wanting just feeling like a different flavor, maybe that you wouldn't normally be able to get in town, I think that that'll be really exciting for folks. We talked with Don Jose's. They did quesabirria tacos last year, which was trending, I guess, on TikTok. And they just had wild success, sold an insane amount of them, and were really, really busy. And it went so well, they added them onto the menu. This year, they're trying something new again. And it's actually something that they enjoy at home, a family dish, which it was fun to hear about from them. It's a Mexican meatball stew that I think they, enjoy at home, and they're bringing it into the restaurant just for the week. So I think people are really going to enjoy that. They have a couple soups on the menu, which I really like. And that's not necessarily something you go to a Mexican restaurant for, but I think, again, just with it being cold, it's fun to try something like that. So, but there's just a whole list. There's 23 restaurants participating. They all were really thoughtful about their specials. And we have the full list on the Chamber website for everybody to browse and see what looks good. And yeah, I'm just excited. We're excited to get out and try things as well. The staff will be sure to, part of the job, I guess. Other duties as assigned: get out and eat good food and celebrate the restaurants. And we talked.
Not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah.
We'll put it that way.
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, really am looking forward to how other people support this too. Last year, we saw some of that happening. We had talked with the retail sector, and they did a great job. We had restaurant owners and retail owners and employees going out to restaurants and, on social media saying, like, it's Restaurant Week and this is one of our favorites. We love coming here, or this special's great. And so there was all of this like secondary marketing happening, which makes a big difference, of course, for the restaurants, and also just makes it feel like a community event, right? We're celebrating these places. For the size of Decorah, we're really lucky to have so many food choices. And that's great for us. That's this wonderful kind of marketing trick, I guess, right? If you have a restaurant week, you must have enough restaurants to warrant it. And so I think that's why like Travel Iowa is picking it up and promoting it. And we're seeing it show up other places because that indicates a certain amount of, kind of like foodie destination.
And of course, a lot of people come to Decorah for their restaurants, but the local people enjoy what they have there. And the biggest thing on my end of things on supporting the local restaurants, you look at the businesses on the back of your park rec teams. You look at the high school fine arts boosters, the athletic boosters, everything community based. You look at the people that have sponsored Holiday Lights. A lot of these are these local businesses because they're definitely involved in the community.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's some of our language we're using locally too is um, they love Decorah all year round and let's spend a week really celebrating them and going out of our way to support these important small businesses. And it doesn't get easier, I don't think, to support small business because you get to not cook and not clean up and eat really good food. And you can say, well, I'm supporting small business. So it's a win. It's an easy win. We try to make it easy.
No doubt about it. Anything else we're missing about Restaurant Week or anything else you want to pass on from a chamber perspective?
Well, just we're excited about this. And I think just a reminder that you have a lot of power as a consumer and a resident to support them too. So social media is a very powerful tool. It's free for people to kind of, showcase these restaurants and tell people what their favorites are. So that's how they help. And it makes a really big difference. So get out, eat some good food and tell your friends. And that's not too bad of a to-do list.
All right, Jessica, appreciate the time as always. And here's to a, great restaurant weekend next week in Decorah. If you walk away from any place hungry next week, it's your own darn fault.
True.
All right, Jessica Rilling from the Decorah Area Chamber of Commerce. Restaurant Week starts next Monday. Time now for our first conversation of 2025 with Decorah School Superintendent Tim Cronin. And Tim, earlier this week, the board looked ahead to the 25-26 school year, and you talked about the school calendar. Public hearing will be happening next month on that. But what's the calendar going to look like, at least from a proposed perspective?
Yeah, from the proposed perspective, well, just as a reminder, there's a couple of limitations, and the main one on the calendar, or the main limitation on the calendar, is the state law that says schools can't start until after August 23rd, and that next year is a Saturday. So that puts us starting school on Monday, August 25th. And if you watch the board meeting, I was sitting next to Carol Sand, and as both of us are former classroom teachers, knowing that a full week of school after a summer off is just a tough haul. Wouldn't be our preference. We'd much rather start the week before with a couple days of school, but we can't do that according to state law. So the calendar does start on August 25th. And we don't have a PD day in October on the proposed calendar, which is a bit of a change. So we kind of go straight through till November. There is a 3-day break at Thanksgiving time, which folks really like this year. Then you slide over to Christmas and New Year's are both on Thursdays. So we did have this year it was on a Wednesday, so we had 2 full weeks and actually 16 days if you counted the weekends. But we're looking at going to school on December 22nd and 23rd, and with then having 2 days before Christmas and coming back on January 5th. All this gets us with the last day of school right now of May 20th, 2026, which is a Wednesday, and that would be the Wednesday before Memorial Day. And we kind of know in Northeast Iowa, and knocking firmly on wood, we usually have a couple snow days. I think the average is about 4 snow days a year. So that would push us to still get done with school in May, even if we had 4 snow days on that calendar.
And that's the calendar for next year. You gave a report about tracking days for the current year's calendar. Seemingly, you're doing okay on that end of things, correct?
Well, now, and there's no snow in the forecast, but I think you just jinxed it. We're not supposed to say that. Um, but we haven't
I
had
was
any.
referring to the past tense and making no future predictions for the
Yeah, I
record.
don't. Is that how jinxes work? Okay. Um, yeah. So what I would say is it's really been a easy winter, and I'm really knocking on wood because you never want to say that. It's been a nice winter in the sense that we haven't had too many snow or sleet or super cold, even though it's pretty cold today and yesterday. So we've only missed, we had an early dismissal the Thursday before winter break, and we did that virtually. So we haven't lost any hours yet. We still have our cushion of about 24 hours. We don't have to use that cushion up, but if you get toward the end of the school year and you've got to make up days, there is the ability to forgive some of the hours if you have a cushion in there. So that's the kind of thing, those are decisions that you look at in April and May. But so far, so good. And there's not much snow on the horizon right now, but we'll see. Maybe this will, if averages work the way they do, maybe that means that February will be a little bit more activity.
And we'll wait and see on that end of things. I know it was on the agenda. It caught my eye a little bit more than probably what came to be of it. There was the first reading of a cell phone policy. When I saw that, it's like, is this related to students and cell phones? But it was a little different than that, correct?
Yeah, this is I know the cell phone for students is a trigger, and we might see some legislation come out of Des Moines about this. This was simply the district provides cell phones for certain employees and cell phone reimbursement for other employees. And quite frankly, couple of us who are on the list to have a district cell phone. It's cumbersome to carry two phones around, so we would prefer just to not have that. The stipend would actually save the district money as well. So just kind of putting that on the board. There's one or two things we need to work out with the admin about this, but understanding whether it's my work cell phone or my personal cell phone, I'm going to respond to texts or calls, and lots of our administrators do, whether it's, you know, Tuesday afternoon or Sunday morning, when people need things, and they're pretty good, but they're just emergency situations that come up that maybe the Nordic dancers need to get into a gym on Saturday and they don't have the right key or something. The administrators are pretty helpful on those kind of things.
I know you talked about the budget or the building project a little bit regarding the preferred site regarding the elementary school. What's the latest in the conversation about the future elementary school?
So we're still working on the sites. We kind of talked about where we want to have the playground equipment, and we were going to move those closer to the tennis courts because we use the tennis courts as basketball, outdoor surface basketball. There might be an opportunity to have a cement pad for that, separate from tennis courts. So then that allowed us to um, move the playground equipment back closer to school. Which would be just more convenient if it is a rainier day and kids need to go inside or go to the bathroom, so stuff like that. Uh, the location of the school really hasn't changed much. We still hope to put it as far to the west as we can on the Hively Island. We do have a sewer that drain that goes through there that we need to get that figured out with the city. So there's some logistic steps that we're working, our architects working with the folks at the city as we might have to reroute. We knew when we bought the land that the sewer drain was there. And so then it's just a matter of how far can we reroute it to, because we can't build a school on top of it. We could have grass on top of it or a parking lot on top of it. But if there's ever a problem, the city would have to go into the sewer. They need to have access to it. You can't go through a second grade classroom. So we need to move that, but we knew that coming along. So, and there's a story where if you run into him, John Yelly will tell you about the time he walked through or crawled through the storm sewer and popped out on Water Street, which doesn't sound like fun to me at all.
It does not, but what You mentioned those conversations happening right now. Are there any other specific conversations related to that building project happening right now?
So what we need to do right now is finalize the exact, like, hey, where are we putting the school? And then that's going to drive our conversations about energy efficiency and where we should be looking at doing the geo piers and drilling and looking at the option of geothermal, and then also just where we're putting all the classrooms. So we're kind of hung up on making sure we know where we can build the school. So that's the main focus of conversations right now.
You had Travis Squires show up from Piper Sandler to discuss budget ramifications. What was his presentation all about?
Well, there's a tool that Piper Sandler, which is a fiduciary agent in Iowa, and they work with ISFIS, a guy by the name of Larry Siegel, who does a lot of school budgeting forecast. They have a model. It's a really, if you like spreadsheets, they're very impressive spreadsheets uh, that allows you to project your school budget and out 5 years based on what enrollment trends you think are going to happen, what you think SSA from the state is going to be, and some other factors. And it really helps you do a couple things. Um, Make sure that, based on your enrollment trends and SSA, do you need to make budget cuts? We did have 50 fewer students in our certified enrollment in the fall. So we knew right away if every student is $8,000 that in general you're going to have to look at making $400,000 in cuts. And so that's one of the things that the tool helps us do is it helps us kind of plot on there how much do you want to cut the first year, how much do you want to cut the second year. The funding, the state funds for 1 year, they give you a 101%. So we won't necessarily lose that money for the budget of 25, 26. It would really hit on the 26, 27, but we'd rather not wait 2 years to make cuts if there's opportunities to do now. So we talked about that. We didn't do as much projection as maybe I'd like. I like to get into the model and say, what if SSA is 1%? What if SSA is 2%? What if our enrollment? Travis showed us the impact of for our UAB and our solvency ratios if we just gain 3 students a year, how that could help turn our budget around. But making sure that we are looking out 5 years, we've got a tool. I always tell people you look out 5 years, but every year when you do your budget, you update it and you kind of see where you're tracking at because you don't have to commit to cutting $400,000 if after the first year your enrollment goes up or SSA goes up. So we talked about the impact of students and what that's going to do on future budgets and what cuts we need to make. And then Travis also spent some time making sure that we can look at borrowing the money for the new bond project and keeping to that 86 cents tax rate increase that was promised to voters. And so we kind of looked at projected tax levies. It was an hour and 15 minutes. I'm not 100% sure. I find it interesting, but then I do that a lot. And so if everybody else doesn't find it as interesting as I am, I won't be offended.
So, long story longer regarding this, knowing the fact that you touched on the 50 student reduction in certified enrollment this year, and that means $400,000 less money. This tool allows you to spread that $400,000 out over a few years rather than making the drastic cut all at once. Is that a fair way to put it?
It gives you the opportunity to look at, yeah, if you did $100,000 this year and $300,000, what will be the overall ramification? It really lets you play with what if scenarios on your budget. Absolutely.
Of course, lawmakers going back to work in Des Moines this week. From an educational perspective, what would you like to see out of Des Moines this year?
Boy, I'd really like to see our SSA as our funding state supplemental aid. I'd like to see that set early and at 2.5 to 3%. And I say that optimistically because I know that I'll be happy with 2.5. When I first started being a superintendent 12, 13 years ago, we were getting 4%. And if we got 3.5, we were disappointed. But we'll be happy with 2.5%. I don't know if I need a lot of changes to the existing stuff that they've got going on. I know cell phone seems to be a real important thing for legislators. I feel that's a more local control, and we can handle that in our classrooms with our teachers. And if it's not a broke, let's not fi if it's broke, don't try to fix it. But that seems to be maybe what we're heading for now. Um, I'd love to see looking at the retention, the truancy policy from last year get some tweaks because, among other things, there's a lot of that's just been it's a nice idea, but it's hard to enforce, and among other things, it's really costly when we have to send certified letters all the time. So, if we could get some tweaks to that, that'd be great. But yeah, funding early, if they want to do the all-day preschool, that would be tremendous. I'll land on that.
And when it comes to state supplemental aid, when you talk about 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%, what does what do those numbers mean? I mean, we hear those numbers get thrown out, but me as a layperson, I don't understand what the 2.5% means. Can you explain that
Oh,
to
sure. So
us?
they just take your budget and so they take the per pupil amount, and currently this year it's $7,826. And then they'll say, okay, we're going to raise that by, 2% or 2.5%. And so the per pupil amount might go up to 8,100. And then you plug that into your budget times the number of students you have, and then that's the amount of general funds that you're going to receive for your school district. So when we talk about 2.5, that creates a problem for schools because, you know, uh, cost of living and prices go up for gasoline and for paper, and uh, we're in a competitive job market where we're struggling to find staff, so we have to give staff raises, and you can't get 2.5% new money and raise the rest of your budget 4%. There, that was kind of one of the points that Travis made last night, is that's where school districts are feeling budget squeezes, is, you can't do that stuff. And, we know it's hard to hire staff, and we want to hire the best staff for Decorah, and we want to try to get more competitive with our salaries. And we've done some stuff, but it's tough. So when we say 2.5, just think about the rest of our budget. That's going up more than 2.5%. And so the larger the number can be, if it wants to be 3%, that every little bit helps and builds up over time too.
And you mentioned the preschool end of things. From what I understand, the area preschools are going to have some open house events here in the not too distant future. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's an opportunity. Boy, got it on my calendar, but there's an opportunity where the preschools are going to come together and have an opportunity for folks to kind of learn more about preschools, and I hope maybe drum up some support for full day funding.
Anything else on your Microsoft Word document on your computer?
I don't think so. I think that's a good summary there. So that's a good place to end.
All right. Appreciate the time as always, Tim. Look forward to our conversation next month.
Sounds good.
Tim Cronin, Decorah School Superintendent. Time now for the monthly conversation with Waukon City Manager Gary Boden. A lot of things to discuss, and one thing in particular, it's the process of putting together the budget for the city of Waukon right now. And related to that budget is discussions that have been taking place and will take place related to the Iowa legislature and property tax reform this year. First of all, Gary, the original bill that was passed a couple of years ago, what type of an effect has it had on the city's ability to raise revenue to provide the services that are necessities for community members? What are your concerns moving forward as that bill really, you get to see the full effect here this year, I'd imagine?
Well, you said the golden word here is necessity. Um, the impact that HF 718 has had on all cities, but it certainly has in Waukon is that it's restricted our ability to generate money for our general fund. The general fund is really only about a third to a quarter, depending on how much money we spend in any fiscal year as it relates to capital improvement. But the general fund is a portion of the overall budgets. I mean, we spend about 2.5 million in our general fund. In contrast, we have three utilities: stormwater, sanitary sewer, and water. Those three combined spend about $1.3 million, $1.4 million. We also have obviously some debt service that we service on capital improvement projects that we're paying. And then on top of that, we also spend, depending on which particular year, anywhere from $1 to $3 to $4 million on actual projects themselves. This upcoming year, we really don't have a whole lot that we're going to spend on capital development. The overall impact is that it's caused cities to scramble and to try and figure out how to pay the operations costs in the general fund. Specifically, we're looking at, as we do, annual salary increases for all our employees. And in the case of the general fund, half of those increases would be related to the police department. Smaller amounts to the library, smaller amounts to the parks and rec departments, and then for that matter, general administration. And quite frankly, the amount that we spend in general administration in this city is much less than any of these other categories, mainly because our office staff also are supported by the costs that are derived out of our utility budgets. For instance, only 40% of my salary and benefits come from, or salaries, I should say, comes from the general fund. I think that what this does is it puts pressure on us to try and figure out how to come up with the money to adequately pay our employees. And at the same time, it's against a backdrop where in prior legislative sessions, recent prior legislative sessions, there have been attempts to quote unquote back the blue. In other words, to provide more support, if you will, to law enforcement agencies, perhaps adjunctly, things related to ambulance and fire. Over time, the city of Waukon has tried to shift some of these costs, if you will, onto other revenue sources. For instance, 2 years ago, the city shifted some of our local option sales tax to provide for police and fire and ambulance vehicles and equipment. What that did is actually take more money away from our local option sales tax that goes toward streets and water and sewer reconstructions. And in fact, there is that impact that we acknowledge today. And in the past, that number was coming out of the general fund and for most purposes related to storm sewer and for that matter, even street and water and sewer construction. I think the thing that we're witnessing is that it's a death by 1,000 cuts, because there has been property tax reforms further and further and further reducing our ability to gain money through this revenue resource since at least 10, 12 years ago. And our ability to generate revenues is also capped from these other sources, like, for instance, franchise fees and things of that sort, or for that matter, even the local option sales and service tax, because there are limitations that the state puts on us as far as how much we can collect. The bottom line here is that we are now at a point where this is getting, the water is really boiling, and it's becoming ever more problematic. one of the things that is really distressing to not just me, but to other cities throughout the state, and particularly people like myself who are city managers and city administrators in cities in Iowa, we know what's going on. We understand the impact, even though by all accounts, the property tax process that we have in this state, dare I say, is incredibly convoluted and complicated. I don't think many people really understand it. And quite frankly, there are times when I question whether there's even state legislatures that understand what's going on. One of the things that's been distressing most recently is that in a meeting that we had last month, sponsored by the Upper Explorer Regional Planning Commission, is that we had a sit down with federal and state representatives that are from our area. And in particular, we had a senator and a state representative talking to us about what they see coming forward in the state legislature. And we asked them, who are the people at the Senate level, for instance, that are really driving the decision making and making these decisions about property taxes? Because to be honest with you, we need to, as cities, as everybody, we need to talk with the true decision makers and the decision leaders about this stuff. And the response that we got was that they didn't give us a response, and on top of it, the representatives and senators that were there said that we are not even aware that property tax reform is even being considered. That statement was made almost exactly at the same time and day as the Senate, or rather the House majority leader and minority leader were saying at a meeting of a similar nature in Des Moines that property tax reform is at the top of the list, further indicating to us that there aren't a whole lot of people making these decisions. It's just a few. And as a result, our concerns about what's going on really aren't being addressed.
You mentioned
the thing that probably is the biggest issue for us is that right now, if we do new development and develop new tax base, that is actually penalizing us as far as having the formula for determining how much property taxes we get. It's always been a rule of thumb that, well, if you develop more property or develop more as far as your tax base is concerned, that you see an increase in your property taxes. Not that it would property tax revenue, not that it would impact anybody who owns a house, that they're there and they're paying their taxes, but this new revenue would be based upon new value added from the standpoint of construction. That is a disincentive. And I'm going to say this again, that is a disincentive for cities to even look at growth. I can't imagine that the state of Iowa wants to disincentivize growth, but that's what that tax law is doing. And that's one of the things that is really, really a concern for us.
And you touched on that being a disincentive for growth. What you're hearing from people that support property tax legislation, they say the property taxes are too high in the state, and that is disincentivizing growth. So the public hears these two arguments, and they're wondering kind of what the heck's going on.
Well,
simplify that for us.
I understand that. I understand that argument, but every time I see surveys, and I've seen a new one that came out, and it says, "Well, our property tax is too high," and my response is, compared to what? It costs money to buy fire trucks. It costs money to pay police officers. If in fact people want to talk about reducing property taxes, can we ask at the same time, what do you want to cut as far as the services that a municipal government provides? Now, understand that when we have people in this state making arguments that we have property taxes that are too high, again, compared to what? I saw a survey that's been out for a while that said that Iowa has the 10th highest property tax rates in the country. as compared to other states. The one just behind us, just a little bit behind us, is Pennsylvania. And even the survey said, well, understand that Pennsylvania property values are much higher than Iowa's. And in fact, while we have effectively the same property tax rate, we get Pennsylvania gets 50% more money out of that same rate than we do. And quite frankly, in Iowa, our property values are rather low compared to a lot of other states. And if we're going to start talking about this comparative issue, then I think that the people that are promoting property tax reform need to understand that what we are doing is within the cost parameters for which aren't affected by local government, but our costs are affected in as much as anything by state and national impacts. The price of a fire truck in the state of Wisconsin or the state of Minnesota is the same as the cost of a fire truck in Iowa. The problem is that how we fund our government is loaded up on property taxes comparatively. But the fact of the matter is that if you go to other states, there's other taxing costs that don't reflect directly into the local government budgets, even though perhaps you get money from them. The state of Iowa is sitting on $6 billion. And they're telling us that we're probably having too much, we have too much money in our local governments. I have been here for 6 years. I am working on the 6th budget for the city of Waukon. We have had 2 full-time positions created since I've been here. One, a police administrative assistant, so that we don't have to have our guys who are working the streets having to do administrative things that take time away from their active duty in public. And we added a 7th police officer to our staff so that we can truly operate a 24/7, 365 department, a law enforcement department that is the only one in our county, including the county, that is a full-time around-the-clock service. I don't think that we're spending money willy-nilly here. And in fact, if we get extra money because we have a little bit more left over, we spend that on fixing streets, fixing our infrastructure. We aren't spending it on some airy-fairy type of project. Our governments, our local governments, are really like HOAs. We provide services to our residents, and we do it in a business form. I think that's another problem that we have here with the state. The state operates in the context of Republicans and Democrats and all that kind of stuff. I have on my city council, we have conservatives and liberals and in-betweeners, probably more conservatives, but that's not to say I'm not a fiscal conservative myself. But the fact of the matter is that we don't work in these kinds of environments. We don't work as Republicans and Democrats. We're working as people trying to get the fixes and do the job that we're responsible for. We don't think in the terms of the culture of politics as much as you would see in any other government. Neither do schools, for that matter.
And based on basically what cities can do when it comes to generating revenue and what cities can do when it comes to spending the revenue that you generate, do city managers really have any other option than being fiscally conservative?
No, and to be honest with you, I would submit to you that our DNA is to be fiscally conservative. Yeah. Because we've never had that kind of latitude. And for broad decisions and broad accusations, and I say that very carefully, accusations that cities are not taking care of the public's money is just a gross misinterpretation of how we do our business. And I challenge any of these state legislators to come out here and tell me and tell our city council and tell our community how should we go about taking cuts out of our budgets. You know, one of the things that I haven't heard from anybody, and that is it's just exactly what the overall tax burden is in our state. I would bet you that if you start looking at how our taxes are structured, and yeah, okay, maybe they're a little bit more high on property taxes. There's other stuff that we don't tax for, or we tax less. I mean, I'm seeing numbers right now that talk about our ability to our tax burdens is probably in the top 15 or 20 in the state. Well, that is using numbers that do not reflect the most recent property tax cut to the flat rate of 3.8%, not property tax, but rather income tax rate cut to 3.8%. Let's talk about that a year from now. Let's talk about that a year from now as far as what the overall burden is concerned. But, you know, at this point in time, we're lumped in with all of the problems that we have in the state. We're just as much a burden as on anybody else. The state's made significant cuts in the state government. And to be honest with you, I think they needed to do it. And they reorganized and they've streamlined a whole lot of things. And the impacts of that are recognized in the fact that there's a big surplus. On the other hand, you know, the nonpartisan budget people that are looking at what is being asked for, generally speaking, and what is the revenue, is showing that revenues are not going to match the expenditures, that there's going to be some reduction as far as the ability to pay for what's going on. What do I say to a union that expects a certain amount of wage increase when, in fact, the $27,000 that we're getting in property taxes this year above and beyond that don't even match 3% increase in wages? What do I say to the community if, in fact, this continues on for another 2 or 3 years, that we're going to have to make some cuts as far as actual services are concerned? I mean, it is not metaphorically, it is literally, do we keep the swimming pool open or do we cut a police officer? That's what this is getting down to. And it's not happening today, but it is coming our way. And there's plenty of people who understand it, like me, that know that this is happening.
Well, you mentioned those cuts aren't happening today, but could happen down the road. Will any of those cuts potentially happen with the new fiscal year budget that you're working on?
We're trying to do it without, and the expectation is we won't. But it's tougher this year than last year, and last year was tougher than the year before. And this property tax reform that we have right now is in place for another 2 fiscal years past the one that we're working on now. And next year could be a real problem for us, because in Iowa, typically, and certainly in Alameda County, this year we didn't go through a revaluation. All we did was effectively, from my understanding, is add new construction into the mix, and we were penalized for that. We could have got another $11,000 or $12,000 if it weren't for the property tax reform, just based upon new construction. And right now, we have apartment complex that's starting its construction. We have a car dealership that's starting its construction, and in 2 months, we're going to have a duplex development that's starting its construction. It takes time for this to get onto the tax rolls, but 2 years from now, if we don't see, if we see new construction coming onto our tax rolls, and in the way that this is structured right now, we're going to be penalized a lot more. And you know, when you grow your city, you recognize that there is going to be incremental increase in cost because you're providing more services, particularly as it relates to issues like about law enforcement, public safety. More people means more of that service need. Well, we're really not asking the existing property taxpayers to do that. We're asking for the new construction, the new value to be added on. We do not have the ability to raise enterprise fees anymore. That's capped by the state. To be honest with you, local option sales tax is capped by the state. We can only get 1%.
And as I said before, in Con, we're doing some things to try and shift some of that general fund burden onto that. Other cities do even a lot more because they're not as restrictive as far as their laws are concerned. Decorah has no limitations on how they can spend their local option sales tax. And Decorah is spending more money out of local option sales tax to pay for the operations of the community. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's what's going on. And to be honest with you, they have a lot more retail tax base to work with, but it also, in context, is taking away from their ability to make improvements to their city, particularly as it relates to upgrades to infrastructure that's certainly in their case, in all cases. I mean, we're dealing with water systems that are over 100 years old and streets that, fail after 30, 40 years or even less, depending on the construction values. We probably are looking at $30 to $50 million of infrastructure improvements over the next 10, 15, 20 years. We're probably slugging away at it at about $1 million a year right now.
You talked about the system of property taxes in the state of Iowa being complex and a little convoluted. Of course, I know everyone looks at their property tax bill as a whole, but a certain goes to the city, a certain goes to the school districts, the hospitals, the other taxing entities. That being said, based on your previous statement during this conversation, what would you do to make it a little less complex and a little less convoluted and make the people understand it a little bit more?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is start dealing with the realities of expenditure as well as the realities of revenue. And we have different categories for which property taxes are assessed. We do not cap money that goes to pension funds as far as property taxation is concerned. We do not cap property taxes as far as liability insurances and property insurance is concerned. We do not cap debt service, although I'll talk about that in a minute. There is a way that debt service actually is capped. We do not cap costs related to health insurance because that is not within our control, or for that matter, it's not even within the state's control. The health insurance situation is there. If we want to talk about increases in insurance costs as a state, want to get into the business of starting to regulate the insurance industry and start telling them how much they should charge, that's the alternative to let's reduce the cost of property taxes. They don't want to do that. I can understand that. But there has to be a realistic discussion here as to what these property taxes do and what they're for. And I know that it is different for schools and it's different for counties. And I know that they have different funding issues. I mean, the issues related to public school financing right now are just as legitimate and are just as concerning as it is for cities and theirs, even though our problems and our issues are different. I still can't quite understand all the people, the PPLE taxation situation, and then there's also the state gives a rebate, if you will, for the use of tax increment financing to schools and all that kind of stuff. And the fact is that I would submit that there's all kinds of city people that don't even understand that, meaning city government people, or for that matter, school government people or county government people. But, when you change one thing versus another, it has a domino effect. Our multiplier went up this year, meaning that we get more money out of the property taxes, because instead of 46% that we charged residents last year, it's 47% this year as far as their assessed valuation is concerned. But how do we determine that? Well, part of it is due to the fact that there's the impact of farmland and farm productivity goes into that calculation.
How can you explain that to somebody? To be honest with you, I'm not even all sure about how that all works, because to be honest with you, I got other things to worry about. But I can I go tell people exactly how the multiplier is fixed? I could probably give a more general answer than and probably as effective an answer as most anybody can. But there are formulas that come out of the state that we have no impact on that make that decision.
Guess that's why we took algebra back in the day, or certain people did on that end of things. Final question for you on this property tax end of things. If Gary Boden was given the power to pass legislation at the state of Iowa, would you go back to what the structure was prior to the reform that passed 2 years ago? Would you make any changes, or would you keep things the status quo?
I certainly would recognize that, given the fact that we had a large across the state increase in assessed valuation, that there should have been some limitation on this. But the fact of the matter is that the limitation went way beyond what would be considered appropriate. I understand that we had a whole lot of houses that now have a much higher value than they did 2-3 years ago. But you know what? People blame property taxes as a reason why we can't build more houses, and housing is such a shortage. My house has an insured value of $100,000 more than its assessed value because of what's going on with the insurance industry. You can't blame property taxes as the reason for why housing has become so difficult. If that is the only issue that we have, then okay, maybe we ought to talk about it that way. But it's not. And I would actually make an adjustment, but not as draconian as what they're doing, and not as thoughtful as thoughtless as it's been. I think the fact is that, you know, we get politicians out here throwing statistics around that are not real to what is happening on the ground. And is that politics? Is that disinformation, or is that misinformation? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. This is that they don't know. But the fact of the matter is that there's plenty of people that do. And now is the time for when we're saying enough is enough.
All right. Anything else from the city's perspective that you want to pass on related to non-budgetary matters, as long as you got the forum this morning?
Well, it is budgetary. I mean, you know, non-budgetary. Right now, the council is going to make a decision in 2 weeks in the next council meeting regarding whether they want to support $11,000 of contribution to the Alameda County daycare wage enhancement program, because we have a significant problem with daycare in this county. We're a daycare desert. And one of the reasons that is that they can't get enough people to do the work, because typically these people are making $4, $5 less than what they're making at Hardee's. We need to do something here to at least stabilize the business so that people can have access to childcare. It's a very expensive thing. It's something that the state recognizes is a problem. And in fact, Alameda County is one of 10 counties in the state that are working on pilot programs to try and address this issue. And it's not just a bricks and mortar issue. It is also an operations cost issue. And if we get stabilization in employment in this area, we think that we'll at least stem the tide and create a little bit more of an employment base, that we won't lose any more daycare. We are losing daycare as well as creating daycare in this county. We are desperately close to losing a major daycare provider in Postville, but that we've turned that around. And when I say we, I'm a member of the Daycare Coalition on a countywide basis that
are addressing this issue before all the cities in the county to try and get some small amount. We're asking for $3 per capita for every city in the unincorporated areas of the county. But that's just to stem the tide. We know from the impacts of what's going on here is that more has to be done, and it has to more than likely come from the state level. And there is a concern that if the state even wants to participate in doing this. On the other hand, they're sitting on a ton of money. And one has to ask the hard question, are you really about trying to stabilize, if not improve, the lives of your citizens, or are you just all about just cutting the taxes and realizing that those taxes do have real value to the quality of life of our city, county, and state?
Gary, always an interesting conversation, always an interesting perspective with the years of experience that you've had in doing this. We appreciate your time as always, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of interesting things to talk about in the month of February as well.
Yeah, well, it's just another day in paradise.
Exactly. Gary Boden, city manager of Waukon, joining us. A munga tuck to our guest on the program, Jessica Rilling from the Decorah Area Chamber of Commerce. Restaurant Week next week in the city of Decorah. Decorah School Superintendent Tim Cronin, and also Waukon City Manager Gary Boden. You realize that if you can't be with us at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning on a radio or on a streaming device, we got ways to bring you this program on your schedule. We put this show on YouTube each and every week. Go to 116 Our Town program. If you're out gallivanting on YouTube, I don't know what gallivant means, but you get the picture. We also put the links up on all of our Facebook pages of our LA Communications radio stations. We put the audio-only link up on SoundCloud as well. But if you want to watch this program, you got the option each and every week on YouTube. Trying to do our best to stay in touch with our communities here at LA Communications. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our sponsor, Decorah Bank and Trust. And we thank you, that's right, you, for tuning in, for logging on, or for watching Our Town on 94.9 and 99.1 The River.